Welcome to Like Mother, Like Murder. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We bring you the good,
the badass,
and the crime.
This is Like Mother, Like Murder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Like Mother, Like Murder, your favorite true crime momcast. It's just me for the opening today, so I do apologize to anyone who only shows up because of how truly amazing my beautiful co-host is. We miss you, Heather. We have so much going on in our work lives and personal lives, so we thought this would be a great opportunity to share an episode from an incredible project we have worked on called You Should Be Here. You Should Be Here is a collaborative podcast that is put on by Fire Eyes Media. All of the podcasters donate their time and effort each season, and all of the proceeds go to a nonprofit that is chosen for that season. The current season out right now is the Survivor series called Death Not Yet. The next season to come out will be Cases That Haunt Us, and that will be available at the end of this month. So if you are not yet subscribed to and listening to You Should Be Here, I know we've recommended it before, but this is your friendly reminder that we are over there amongst so many other incredible podcasters and friends. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so the episode I will be sharing with you guys is from the You Should Be Here series called Or No, which is the season that focuses on domestic violence victims and survivors. This is on Francine Hughes, and Heather did cover her story back in episode 9 of this podcast, back when we were wine time, and I am so happy to be sharing it yet again in a completely different light. So please listen to my favorite podcaster ever, our very own Heather, as she shares the incredible survivor story of Francine Hughes.
Do they love you? Love doesn't hurt you. Don't check yes. It's time to check or no. This is You Should Be Here, a collaborative podcast. I'm Jen Rivera, one half of Fire Eyes Media. This is our second series titled Or No, and together with many of our podcasting friends, we're telling stories about victims of abuse in order to raise awareness, educate, and advocate. Please visit buymeacoffee.com/youshouldbehere to donate. Thank you for being here. Now let's go.
Hello, everyone. It's Rachel and Heather, the hosts of your favorite true crime momcast, Like Mother, Like Murder. Every week, we bring mom-related crime content from missing moms to murdered moms, moms who murder, survivors, and more.
You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And we are so excited to be joining this amazing group of true crime podcasters.
Today, we will be telling you the story of Francine Wilson, who stood trial in 1977 and, in doing so, would set in motion drastic changes in how domestic abuse and violence was handled in the U.S.
Welcome to Or No, a Podcasters Give Back collaboration. All the podcasters you hear on this feed have donated their time and research to help advocate for victims of domestic violence. And we are raising money to give back to nonprofits which are standing against domestic violence.
If you or someone you love is a victim of violence, please contact the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or text BEGIN, BEGIN, to 88788. To donate, visit the link in our show notes. As you might have imagined from the theme of this collaboration, the story you are about to hear contains instances of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, as well as alcohol abuse. Please take care when listening. Danesville is a small town in the southern part of Ingham County in Michigan. If you look up a map, Danesville is an itty-bitty dot in the southeast part of the state. And the only thing smaller than the dot on the map is the population. In 1975, just 2 years before the crime that I will be discussing took place, the population of Danesville was 516. 516 people. In another report, in 2015, the population had grown to 603 people. If you scroll through Wikipedia to find information on Danesville, you won't find much, but under notable people, you will see the name Francine Wilson Hughes. And because of her, this small town is known for something very big. As we will come to see, Francine's life and legacy are everlasting. But she came from very humble beginnings. She was the daughter of a blue-collar worker and a waitress. She was born in Stockbridge, Michigan in 1947. She was one of several children in the family. But unfortunately, her childhood and this family were not free from violence. Francine's father abused alcohol, and he would regularly abuse Francine's mother. Like many young women in the same situation, we can assume Francine wanted a better life. And at the very young age of just 16, Francine dropped out of high school to marry James Mickey Hughes. We will be referring to him as Mickey throughout the rest of the episode. Francine would later say about Mickey, quote, "I thought he was sophisticated," end quote. Mickey was a few years older than Francine, and he was also a high school dropout, but he had his own car, which was pretty uncommon among the friends that Francine knew. And seemingly, this dashing young man quickly swept Francine off her feet. Maybe Francine thought this was just the beginning of a brand new life. Her fairy tale finally come true. But it did not take long for this fairy tale to come crashing down around her. Now, Francine was never keen on the publicity that would eventually follow her later in her life. But people described her as upbeat, caring, loving, and with a great sense of humor. And most of all, an amazing mother. Despite a rough childhood and, as we will come to find out, a marriage that was also plagued with violence, her role as a mom was important to her, and she did everything she could for her kids. Her daughter Nicole said her mom was strong and provided the family with anything they needed.
That is a testament to her as a person and a mother. Being able to be so positive and strong despite a less than ideal childhood.
Definitely. Unfortunately, though, despite this positive personality, Francine was not able to escape the abuse that had plagued her childhood. Only weeks after marrying Mickey, this new pattern of abuse began. Mickey would lash out at her in jealous rages, and Francine was plunged into yet another violent household. Francine and Mickey had moved to Danesville and began living with his parents. They would eventually move to their own place and have 4 children. But throughout the years, Francine was still subject to domestic abuse from Mickey. In 1971, Francine had the courage to speak to a local social worker and decided to divorce Mickey. This was not something so easily done at the time. There was a huge lack of resources for women in Francine's situation, but she knew what she needed to do. Yet again, though, the prospect of a new life, a better life, slipped through her fingers. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, Mickey was involved in a serious car crash. As we've described, Francine was a caring person who did what she could for her family. And because of this caring nature, Francine took Mickey back and nursed him back to health. But, as is so often the case, things quickly returned to old patterns and the abuse continued. It actually got worse. Something as small as the inflection of a word would set him off. Mickey would pin Francine down in a chair and just pummel her. And to make matters even worse, their 4 children were often witnesses to this violence. Francine's children would recall that their mom would try to get away, but Mickey would tell her, quote, "There is nowhere you can go, bitch, that I won't find you," end quote. Francine's children would later recall these instances and how the whole family lived in constant fear. So let's fast forward a bit to 1977. It has now been over 13 years that Francine has been fighting through constant abuse. But during this time, Francine had also gone back to school, where she had earned her GED, and she had started attending classes for secretary school. She continued to endure and make positive changes, but she felt that she could not remove Mickey from the home or move herself out, fearing that he would make good on those constant threats to kill her.
This is absolutely heartbreaking because as true crime podcasters, we know where these situations usually end up.
So true. But we're about to get to a twist in this story that is not quite the tragic story that we unfortunately hear all the time. But first, let's talk about the night of March 9th, 1977. And these details may be hard to hear, so again, I'm going to add just an extra listener discretion here. Please take care of yourselves. So on March 9th, 1977, Mickey had once again lashed out on Francine. She had come home from secretary school, and she was just trying to make dinner for the family. Mickey began smashing food in the kitchen, dumping out the garbage, and rubbing it into Francine's hair. This escalated into Mickey physically hitting her. Mickey even forced Francine to burn her school books and demanded that she drop out of school. He also threatened to destroy her vehicle. And to just make matters worse, the cops were called to the house that night. But they refused to arrest Mickey since they had not witnessed the abuse themselves. A ridiculous standard to follow.
You're telling me that the police knew that he was physically violent with Francine and they did nothing?
Yes, that is what I am telling you. Lee Atkinson, who would eventually work on the case, says that at the time, police officers would not arrest someone for a misdemeanor, which is a whole other problem in and of itself. Classifying violent domestic abuse as a misdemeanor? Anyway, like I was saying, police officers would not arrest someone for a misdemeanor unless they physically saw the crime being committed. So for Francine, this policy meant that police came to the house repeatedly over the years and did not arrest Mickey for assaulting Francine. reports show that he was only ever put in handcuffs if he was aggressive with the police officers. This is a quote from Lee Atkinson. Does she have bruises? Yes. Does she look like she's been abused? Yes. The police will take a report, but they wouldn't make an arrest. End quote. So back to the night of March 9th, 1977. Because Francine had called the police, Mickey told her, quote, it was all over, end quote. Arjun Graydanis, who would eventually work on the case, says, quote, the police were there and they saw that she was severely beaten up and they didn't do anything. And then he said right in front of the police officers, he said, I am going to kill you when they leave, end quote. So Mickey is there, threatening Francine's life in front of the police, and they just walk out the door. So Francine is left to fend for herself. When the cops left, Mickey continued his beating, and then he forced Francine to have sex with him before he fell asleep. Francine would say, quote, I was thinking about all the things that had happened to me, all the times he had hurt me, how he had hurt the kids. I thought, I'm never coming back. Never. And then I thought, because there won't be anything to come back to. That's when I decided I would burn everything. End quote. When Mickey fell asleep drunk, Francine packed the children into the car. She then doused the bed where Mickey was sleeping in gasoline and lit it on fire and drove away. Francine drove straight to the Ingham County Jail in Mason. She walked into the guardhouse at the sheriff's office and she confessed to setting her ex-husband on fire. Police and firefighters were immediately sent to the residence, but Mickey Hughes was found dead from smoke inhalation. Francine was charged with first-degree murder of her ex-husband.
Wow. Okay, so what happens now? I mean, you have a burned house, the confession, and it's the 70s. Do they understand the significance of the years of abuse that she went through? Will it actually impact what happens to her?
So at the time, judges and juries and society in general regularly downplayed domestic violence and abuse. In 1977, the same year that Francine Wilson Hughes killed her husband, the FBI had reported that spousal abuse was the United States' most underreported crime, and it was considered a family affair. There were few, if any, shelters for women back then. No safe place for her to run. Francine would go on to say, quote, I was a beaten down, scared animal. There was no help. I thought, it doesn't matter to anyone. It's just something I have to accept. End quote. But what Francine did not know at the time was this case would kickstart change. It would start a discussion about domestic violence in America that would change not just Francine's life, but the lives of many more women enduring similar circumstances. Francine's lawyer recalls that because Mickey had been asleep, they didn't think they could use a straight-up self-defense argument because it wasn't in the middle of a fight, right? So instead, they pled temporary insanity. They used an idea that would come to be known as battered women syndrome, a term coined by the psychologist Lenore Walker, based on her research with abused women in the US and the UK. Battered women syndrome has now been classified as a form of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay, Heather, you know the psychology of this. Explain what this means for all the listeners.
So basically, the underlying idea is that discerning or evaluating the level of risk in any given moment is difficult, if not impossible, in ongoing patterns of trauma. So we all know self-defense is when someone uses force to protect themselves or others from a reasonable belief of imminent danger. Now, the key word here is reasonable. If you are in a situation like Francine was, where there was an abusive and traumatic environment, and that abuse had the potential to occur suddenly. For example, something as simple as an inflection in your voice could result in a tirade of assault. You never really know if and or when the risk of being in imminent danger would necessitate self-defense. When you are in a constant state of trauma and fear, your brain is literally rewired chemically, physically. And maybe in that moment, someone who has not had a history of trauma wouldn't see a reasonable belief of imminent danger. But someone like Francine and the many, many others who do have that history, the risk of danger is a constant. It is never ending. Their life experiences have taught them that there is always a reasonable belief of imminent danger.
Yeah, all of that makes sense. So how did this go over in trial? Like you said, this was the 70s. Did people understand?
6 months later, in November of 1977, the jury deliberated for just 5 hours, and they found Francine not guilty. This plea of temporary insanity, backed by this concept of battered women syndrome, was successful, and Francine was acquitted. It was an unexpected outcome, but it was a big win, not just for Francine, but for women all over the country. As we mentioned at the top of the episode, the results of this trial had far-reaching and lasting effects. It not only set legal precedent, but also thrust the current understanding and handling of domestic violence into the national spotlight. The details of the case became known as burning bed syndrome, and it began being studied by academics. Battered women syndrome began being used as a defense in other cases of women killing their abusers. Outside of academic and legal circles, popular culture was also inspired by Francine's story. They've made books and movies about her, including one starring Farrah Fawcett, fittingly called The Burning Bed. According to reports, this 1984 TV movie was watched by over 75 million viewers when it aired on NBC. There is even a country song that Rachel and I know and love called Independence Day by Martina McBride. Like I said, this trial drew national attention, and the evidence presented detailing the years of domestic violence that Francine endured and the physical and psychological trauma that it caused forced society to take a closer look at what used to be whispered about, hidden behind closed doors, or simply swept under the rug. Social service agencies and police departments alike across the country began looking into more aggressive policies to prevent domestic and spousal abuse. The number of shelters for women in situations of domestic violence grew from a mere handful in 1977 to nearly 700 in 1984, the year The Burning Bed was televised. As for Francine's personal life, after her acquittal, she got remarried to a country musician and she became a nurse. She eventually retired, and after retirement, she sat with the elderly and also taught nursing classes. Francine died in 2017 from complications of pneumonia. She was 69 years old. She is survived by her children and several grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Francine was always pretty humble about the whole thing. She wasn't ever trying to make a statement. She was just doing what she felt she needed to do for herself and for her children at the time. Francine herself said she was just, quote, an ordinary person, end quote. But her children recognized the impact their mom had. Nicole, her daughter, said, quote, she changed so many lives. She changed the lives of people we will never know, end quote. So here is our call to action.
Through this collaboration, we hope we can do our parts to change people's lives, and we need your help to do it. Watching someone you know endure an abusive situation can be difficult, and it may be hard to know how to respond or help. While the initial instinct is to save them, it is almost never quite that simple. So here are some things that you can do.
Providing emotional support by validating and acknowledging the difficulty of the situation. Do not judge their decisions, including decisions to stay. Help them by identifying a support network and encourage speaking to people who are trained to help. Help them learn about their legal rights through resources like womenslaw.org. Another resource we mentioned at the top of the episode is the Domestic Violence Hotline, available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. Or you can text BEGIN to 88788. And most of all, remember, you're wanted, you're needed, and you deserve a safe love.
Fire Eyes Media.